is the summer of 1969, and tensions in the United States are at an all-time high. The Vietnam War is raging, and the country is deeply divided over civil rights and social justice. In this atmosphere of chaos and uncertainty, a group of military leaders and right-wing politicians stage a coup, seizing control of the federal government. The coup leaders are convinced that the country is on the brink of collapse and they see themselves as the only ones who can save it. They immediately declare martial law, suspending the Constitution and dissolving Congress. The coup leaders quickly establish a provisional government led by a charismatic general who is known for his hardline stance on civil rights and social justice. Coup leaders launch a brutal crackdown on dissent, imprisoning civil rights activists, journalists, and anyone who speaks out against the new government. The country is plunged into chaos and violence. As the coup leaders use force to suppress any oppression, the international community expresses deep concern about the situation, and there are fears that the conflict could spill over into neighboring countries. As the country descends into war, the situation becomes increasingly desperate. The coup leaders are determined to hold on to power and they are willing to do whatever it takes to maintain control. The federal government, which has been pushed out of power, is caught off guard by the sudden coup, and it takes several months for them to mount a meaningful response. As the war rages on, many innocent civilians are caught in the crossfire. The country's economy and infrastructure are destroyed, and there are widespread reports of human rights abuses and atrocities. The government, the international community, calls for an end to the conflict, but the coup leaders refuse to negotiate or make any. The conflict intensifies as more and more people take up arms against the new government. The situation becomes increasingly volatile, with both sides committing brutal acts of violence. There is a growing sense that the country is on the brink of collapse and that the conflict could continue indefinitely. In the end, it is the determination and resilience of civil rights activists and ordinary citizens that helps bring the conflict to a close. A coalition of activists and sympathetic government officials launched a series of protests and nonviolent actions that helped to rally support for the restoration of the rule of law. After months of fighting, the coup leaders are forced to surrender, and the country is slowly rebuilt from the rubble of war. The conflict leaves deep scars that take years to heal, and it serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of extremism and the importance of protecting all the rights of all the citizens. It is a dark period in American history and one that is never forgotten, but it also serves as a testament to the resilience and strength of American people. As the country rebuilds, there is a renewed sense of purpose and determination. People are determined to build a society that is based on justice and equality. There is a growing sense of optimism and hope for the future. While the scars of the conflict remain, they serve as a reminder of the importance of standing up for what is right in the fight against extremism and oppression. Now, obviously, that's a hypothetical scenario, but today we're going to explore a fascinating hypothetical scenario. What if the Civil War happened 100 years later? Would the United States be the superpower it is today? Would our social, political, and economic systems be drastically different? Let's dive in and find out. To fully understand the implications of the Civil War happening 100 years later, we need to start by looking at the political and social climate of the 1960s. This was a time of great change and upheaval in the United States, with the civil rights movement pushing for greater equality and social justice. However, if the Civil War had happened in the 1960s, it's likely that these issues would have been even more contentious and divisive than they were in the 1860s. One possibility is that the war could have been sparked by the struggle for civil rights. The tension between white supremacists and the black community was at an all time high, and the idea of secession may have seemed appealing to some southern states. If a civil war had occurred over these issues, it is possible that the United States may have emerged as a divided nation with a separate Confederate States of America that sought to maintain white supremacy. The civil rights movement could have triggered the conflict. The civil rights movement was at its peak during the 1960s, and tensions were high between white supremacists and the black community. The possibility of secession could have been appealing to politi- political polarization could have ex- Political polarization could have exacerbated the conflict. Political polarization was high in the 1960s, and the Civil War may have been fought along ideological lines, with different factions fighting for their version of America. This could have led to an even greater division and polarization within the United States. The emergence of new technologies could have also affected the conflict. The Civil War fought in the 1960s could have been a very different one fought in the 1860s due to technological advancements of the intervening century. New weapons and communication technologies would have played a significant role in the outcome of the conflict. 2. On the other hand, if the Civil War had happened in the 1860s, it's also possible that the war may have been fought over different issues altogether. With the Cold War in full swing, tensions between the United States and Soviet Union were high. It's possible that the conflict could have been sparked by a foreign power, with the United States being embroiled in a war that was fought on its own soil. This would have drastic effects on the U.S. economy. The United States had become the world's largest economy by the 1960s, but if the Civil War had happened just a few decades earlier, it's possible that this economic growth may have been hindered. The war could have disrupted trade and commerce, leading to economic instability and a prolonged recovery period. Global, the global and economic the global economic impact would have also been immense. The United States' internal conflict could have had far reaching consequences for the global economy. Other nations may have taken advantage of the United States' weakened state to assert their own interests, leading to a different balance of power on the global stage. This would have also affected the post war economic growth. The post war period is often marked by economic growth and rebuilding, but if the Civil War had happened in the 1960s, it is possible that this growth may have been different or slower or may have not even happened at all. The emergence of new technologies and industries may have been affected, leading to a different economic landscape than what we know today. We also need to consider the let's see, where am I? Back to my earlier point, foreign powers may have intervened or used this to their advantage. The United States is a dominant and diplomatic power in the 1960s and still remains that way to this day, and it's possible that other nations could have been hesitant to interfere within a domestic conflict. This could have allowed the United States to fight the war on its own terms without interference from foreign powers. The opportunities for foreign powers to interfere were also immense. On the other hand, it's possible that foreign powers could have taken their advantage of the United States' internal conflict to assert their own interests. This could have led to foreign interference in the conflict, with different nations taking sides and potentially prolonging the war. The long term implications for international relationships could have also had a drastic effect on the political climate of the 1960s and beyond. The outcome of the Civil War would have had long term implications for the United States' relationships with other nations. The emergence of a divided nation or a weaker United States could have led to a different balance of power on the global stage, affecting diplomatic and economic relationships with other nations for years to come. The Civil War would have not been fought in a vacuum, obviously, and its outcome would have had these far reaching implications that I previously mentioned for the United States' relationships with other nations. And those were the three ways it could have played out. There's always infinite possibilities, but those are the most likely. If the South had successfully seceded, it would have created a new nation state that would had to establish diplomatic relationships with other countries. This could have led to new alliances and rivalries on the international stage, potentially affecting global politics for decades to come. So, what if the American Civil War had happened 100 years later? As we've seen the political and social climate of the 1960s, the economic impact of the war, and the international implications on the conflict could have created a vastly different alternate timeline. While we'll never know exactly what would have happened, exploring the possibilities and thinking about the what ifs to help us better understand the past and the present is very interesting and can help you understand our current timeline even more. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope we'll see you in next time for another exploration of alternate timelines.